it is up to council if they want to check their emails. I will be providing that in writing. I can provide you a summary right now if you wish, of some of the issues.
I would personally like it if that's possible. Good with it? And
First of all, I would say as to the issue of repeal of the statute, the city attorney neglected to mention the Local Development Act statute directly on point. That is, if you give me just a moment, I'll pull it up. It'd be cool if we could pull it up here. It's 62 OS 856C. And I'll preface this by saying part of the reason I'm here tonight and part of my background is I was very much down in the dirty of this very issue with UMP TIF 2 and the amended project plan and the evaluation of the arguments there. Section C of that statute provides, notwithstanding any provision contained in an ordinance, resolution, or project plan, an ordinance or resolution establishing an increment district shall constitute a legislative act and may be repealed, modified, or amended at any time during the term of the increment district. That means year 1, year 6, year 17, year 23. When you repeal it is very relevant to the contracts clause argument. The only major exception is if bonds, as we heard in the contracts clause analysis, if bonds are outstanding that are issued pursuant to Article 10, Section 35 of the Oklahoma Constitution. You go on OSCN, that little thing will link you right to Article 10, Section 35 of the Constitution, and the type of bonds they are describing there are a type of bond authorized by the vote of the people. How ironic that City Council maintains the plenary, broad, virtually absolute authority to repeal a TIF ordinance under the Local Development Act unless bonds that have been issued by a vote of the people are outstanding. I think you'll find that's what's going on in the contracts clause case that was cited there, is it was too late to be repealing the ordinance under the contracts clause. What I would say about the contracts clause argument, just as we dealt with, and I was actually dealing with the developer side on this one with TIF 2, was that argument was made back then, and that argument was made in the context of TIF 2 being performed for years and years and years. Development agreements that were valid, that were undoubtedly valid, have been performed for years. Projects have been completed, projects were underway. There were millions of dollars in increment funds in the increment fund pot. There are none here. There are no projects enacted. The increment hasn't begun. Now is the time that can be done, minimizing the risk of a loss in a contracts clause case. Now, what generally happens in a contracts clause case? The party seeking to invalidate the city or governmental action that substantially impairs the obligation of contracts usually seeks injunctive relief, declaratory relief, and what that means is they come into court and they say, hey, they can't do this. And the first thing a judge does in that type of a case is the judge, as he did with the resolution election case that happened a few months ago, the judge says, can they or can they not do this? If the judge says they can do this, there is no $230 million judgment to send to the jury because the judge has just validated your action. If the judge can't do this, again, it is highly likely there is no issue of a $230 million judgment to send to the jury because what the judge has just done is said, you can't do this. And I have made this equitable ruling. I have made this ruling as a matter of law before we would send this $230 million judgment request to a jury. And therefore, you have to go through with the TIF. And all these issues get resolved before we send the issue of monetary relief to a jury, which a jury of Cleveland County decides. A judge doesn't enter judgments for $230 million. A jury does that. If there is injunctive or declaratory relief sought, a city can come in and say, hey, judge, you have to decide this issue before we get to the issue of monetary relief. So to me, it's, you repeal the ordinance, you take action to send it to a vote, you get sued. Yeah, you're gonna get sued. There's two things that are gonna happen. Just like happened the last time a former council tried to send this to an election. A judge is gonna say either you can or you can't repeal the ordinance. A judge is gonna say either you can or you can't send this to an election. And if the judge says you can, there's no $230 million judgment because the judge just ruled what you did was legal. If the judge says you can't, there's still no $230 million judgment because the judge just put the TIF back in place before you ever got to the point where you had to decide the developers were going to lose any money. So yes, they're gonna sue you. They're gonna include money. They're gonna include a prayer for relief for all kinds of money judgment, but it is a substantially implausible outcome in this case that monetary relief would be granted to anyone, because it would be a matter of do you or do you not have to do this TIF? Can you or can you not send this to the election? Now, on the election issue, I would say that an analysis of Article 2, Section 9 of the city charter needs to be done. I didn't see that up there, just like I didn't see an analysis, I didn't see a mention of the Local Development Act. And what I would say about the Local Development Act is if you read that statute, the drafters of the Local Development Act, you can tell they had this contracts clause problem in mind when they did this. What they said, if you read that statute, you will see that they set up a regime that kind of addresses the issue of is a city substantially impairing the obligation of contracts? And that's only the first element of contracts clause violation. You also have to show that there's nothing the city could have done to advance its legitimate interest other than what it did. So when you look at substantial impairment, baked into the statute is kind of a contracts clause safety valve analysis of saying, well, you can repeal it, but you can't repeal it once these bond issues come out.